life will depend on how well they perform as a political party in the parliament. Secondly, I'm sure, Kong Rufus, alam mo na yung damdamin ko tungkol dyan sa tinamaan na party list na yan, which has been so bankrupt in its implementation. Unfortunately, hindi naman kayo nakinig sa amin at the time that I was laying out to you really what the party list system consists of. But yes, the time does not give, wala akong pisara dito, hindi ko ma-explain. But, you know, so these are the things that I stand for, to shift to a federal system, to shift to a parliamentary system, and to pay close attention to the party list. The underpinning philosophy here is this. You want to change people, it will take 3 generations, Congressman Puno, to change them. It's 90 years. You want to short-circuit the change the structure within which they perform. Revise the Constitution. And when you change the structure within which they perform, you engender behavior change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So very clear, the position to shift as a system of government from unitary to federal and the form from presidential to parliamentary and the party list system. Thank you, Dr. Carlos, once again. And now the next one will be, in the order of appearance, Attorney Leonardo Camacho, over there from the Ateneo Law School. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Honorable members of the House Committee. It's my privilege to share some thoughts and insights on some of the proposed amendments to the 1987 Constitution. First, on whether the existing environment is conducive for initiating constitutional change, and I believe that our friends from UP Law School earlier harped on the same matter. Even the most well-intentioned constitutional reform can fail if citizens harbor serious doubts on the process or the motivation behind constitutional change. And historical precedent is illustrative of this, with past efforts to amend the Constitution since the 1990s failing, regardless of their merits. So today, the social political context is again marked by some level of public skepticism, intensified by widely perceived systemic corruption in government. So in such an environment, we respectfully submit that pursuing constitutional change at this time may risk failure to secure that required social buy-in to successfully introduce enduring amendments to the Constitution. On the necessity of select proposed amendments to key economic provisions of the Constitution, we will submit our position paper to elaborate on our points. But we firstly recognize that the goal of attracting increased foreign investment as a means to enhance the economy is a very valid one. Nevertheless, it is our view that constitutional change is not the only and often not the decisive lever to drive economic growth. In many pivotal sectors of the economy, it is our view that the present constitutional and statutory frameworks already allow some level of meaningful participation by foreign entities. But just to highlight some of these points, with respect to the exploration, development, and utilization of natural resources, despite the nationalization provision under Article 12, Section 2, it is our view that the Constitution actually allows for a more permissive approach than what the plain text suggests. And this is most pronounced actually in the power sector, which is a major source of foreign investment and a significant pillar of the national economy. So to illustrate, the Supreme Court before has recognized the entry of foreign investors in the electric power industry, and in fact allowed foreign corporations to own and operate power plants such as hydroelectric power plants. And particularly with respect to renewable energy, which has become one of the strategic investment priorities of the government, existing legal frameworks have allowed 100% foreign participation in the sector. And as a result, in 2023, the Philippines actually achieved its status as a leader in renewable energy investment in the ASEAN region, despite the constitutional framework that we have. This applies as well with respect to mineral and oil and petroleum sectors, wherein the Constitution allows foreign participation in the large-scale exploration, development, and utilization of mineral and petroleum resources through foreign and technical assistance agreements or service contracts. And actually, to note, in October 2025, the DOE announced 8 new petroleum service contracts with several foreign entities having a value of $207 million, the largest one-time award in Philippine history. This substantial investment in the petroleum industry proceeded notwithstanding the nationality limitations embodied in the current constitution. With respect to the proposal authorizing
And there is the example of the Japanese manufacturing companies leaving China about 4 years ago, who put the Philippines as destination behind Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. When the Japanese Chamber of Commerce was asked why we were number 4, since manufacturing in our constitution is allowed 100% foreign ownership. There was much discussion of the pros and cons, but also what came out was that finally the factor against their coming here was what they call country situation or country image. And they said primarily that was corruption, including transactional legislation, which would open the door wider by the insertion of that phrase, unless otherwise provided by law, unquote, in the economic provisions of which corrupt politicians and greedy big business are very adept. Clearly, there is no need or requirement for charter change in the Philippine Development Plan, nor the investment pledges to the President. What then is the purpose of a convention, or for that matter, a constituent assembly? I cannot argue the proponents of Chacha often blame the Constitution for our being the laggards in our part of the world on growth, poverty reduction, and increasing inequality, and for being the hindrance to our need for foreign direct investment. On the contrary, I would argue that it is not the Constitution that needs revision. Maybe the Philippine Development Plan needs a revision in addition. It has good programs on addressing growth and poverty, and it's correct in not proposing charter change. But it has no programs to address the social, economic, and political inequalities of a feudalistic society of political dynasties in all of its 400 pages. Perhaps it is against the interests of those in power. Social justice does not appear in big terms in the 8th socio-economic agenda of President Bongbong Marcos. I will also answer the question that begs to be asked. Is foreign direct investment really that critical to our development that merits changing our Constitution? So may I have your indulgence to talk briefly about the Constitution they want to change? Because surveys show that 73% of our people know nothing or very little about it. And we are told that an ignorant people can never remain a free people because the democracy cannot survive with civic ignorance. So if I may just cite some parts of the 1977 Constitution. Before the Commission started writing, we went around the country to listen to the people. They said they preferred the stability of familiar structures, a democratic, representative, presidential system with checks and balances and separation of powers. And overwhelmingly, the people wanted the power to directly elect the president. Where is the federalism here? There are a number of provisions of the 1935-1973 constitutions that are retained in the 1987 Constitution. But the 1987 Constitution innovated with three central themes. First, the heart of the Constitution is social justice, with the poor as a center of development, as enunciated by the President of the Constitutional Commission, former Justice Cecilia Muñoz Palma. Hence, the new Article 13 on social justice to address not only mass poverty, but also the gross social, economic, and political inequalities that is rooted in a feudalistic system of dynastic families that has been impervious to change for generations, with the corruption that goes with it. The compelling principle is encapsulated, if you want it, in one sentence, one phrase, by equitably diffusing wealth and political power for the common good. Second, never again to any authoritarian government. Hence, the strict limitations and conditions for declaring martial law, and new provisions on the Bill of Rights, and a Commission on Human Rights to protect citizens against abuses by the state. Third, the national destiny must firmly and safely rest on Filipinos themselves. Never again amendments similar to the 1935 Constitution that gave Americans equal rights to our patrimony, where even our exchange rate after independence could not be changed without the approval of the United States government, which resulted, as you know, in a foreign exchange crisis of the early 50s. Before the commission started writing, we went around the country to listen to the people. They said they preferred the stability of familiar structures, a democratic, representative, of course, presidential system, and overwhelmingly, as I said, to direct the election power directly to elect the president. There are certain provisions in the 1935 and 1937 constitutions that are retained in the 1987 constitutions. But the 1987 constitution innovated with three central themes. Three central themes. The first, the heart of the Constitution is social justice, with the poor as a center of development. Hence, the new article on Article 13 to address not only mass poverty, but gross economic, political inequalities that is rooted in a feudalistic system with the corruption. Second, never again to any authoritarian government. Hence, the strict restrictions and conditions on declaring martial law, and the new provisions in the Bill of Rights and Commission on Human Rights. Third, the national destiny must surely rest in the hands of the Filipinos. The 1987 Constitution also cut the umbilical cord of the 1935 and 1937 Constitutions to the United States Constitution. The U.S. Constitution gives primacy to civil and political rights because it is a country of immigrants who only started from the same position, and they only wanted to get out of autocracy. Hence, the emphasis in the United States on individual rights and market economy. Our Constitution gives social and economic rights equal primacy with civil and political rights, because we are a country of inequalities from the colonial days to the present, where the starting positions of the rich and the poor are not equal. Social justice is about the adjustment of starting positions, because we foster the market competition with such development paradigms as it is not enough to provide equality, opportunity, and fair process. And we are always told that rising waters raised all boats, forgetting that many boats are crammed with people without food amid the luxury yachts of the rich, like Mr. Ko. That is why social justice provisions are even included in the article on the economy. Under Article 12, Section 6 of the economy, the use of property bears a social function, and all economic agents shall contribute to the common good, subject to the duty of the state to promote distributive justice where the common good so demands. Without the vision of a new social order, the state should engage in income distribution program, primarily quality education and quality healthcare, and 4 asset distribution programs for the poorest of the poor. What are these? Agrarian reform, urban land reform and housing, ancestral domain, and fisheries reform. How can the young of the poor compete for career and business opportunities with children of the rich when the quality of education, of their education and health are not the same? And I think it is in the budget that they took away a lot of money from health and education. With regard to the asset reform programs, CARP, ancestral domain, and fishery, all of these programs are underperforming and underfunded For example, agrarian reform was supposed to have 225 billion over 20 years. They gave only 175. Or they put loopholes in the law, such as a distribution of shares instead of land in Hacienda Luisita. Fortunately, we went to the Supreme Court and we won a decision of 14-0 in favor of the farmers of Hacienda Luisita. 3 days ago, I got a call from them that they have another problem, that Agrarian Reform Department decided against them on 321 hectares of land that are supposed to be included in their land. And urban land reform and housing, the LGUs, the local governments, were able to sell their lands to rich land developers with commissions, of course, instead of using them for housing for the poor, to save them 4 hours of heavy traffic to go to work. Then there is the declining harvest of municipal fishermen because their fishing grounds are not protected against large-scale fishing, some owned by politicians. The recent case of Mercidar, in which the Supreme Court allowed large-scale fishing in municipal powers, we now have a petition in the Supreme Court, Cardinal David and I, questioning this decision and asking for a reconsideration. We found out that the chairman of Mercidar Fishing is a lady, and her husband is the present chairman of the Commission on Audit. No wonder she has influence. Our indigenous peoples used to own all the land, but were driven to higher ground by our colonial masters in complicity with. Look at the
One of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines, representing today's youth. For today, the country saw one of the worst corruption schemes erupt after the President's State of the Nation address last July 2025. Flood control projects became the center of public attention as monsoon rain submerged communities in deep flooding while corrupt officials drenched 118.5 billion pesos from public coffers packed in suitcases since 2023. This compounds existing issues with anomalous public spending which remain unaccounted for, such as the utilization of the confidential and intelligence funds, inaccessible universal healthcare services, short-change education funding across all levels, and other crucial welfare programs that would have addressed widespread poverty, unemployment, and education losses. And these damages indeed raise the need to reassess the viability of the frameworks that shape government policy, public services, and national development. Desperate measures must be taken if this administration is serious in heeding public outcry against corruption and impunity. However, the College Editors Guild of the Philippines asserts that the charter change, which this floor is consulting today, we believe that it will not solve the country's woes. This country needs more than a revamp of constitutional provisions. The Marcos administration must first resolve systemic corruption and inefficient public service before it tinkers with constitutional provisions. We reject all current attempts to revise the 1987 Constitution and its standing provisions at this juncture. The prevailing socio-political climate will only lean towards the interest of the disintegrating political unions and not in favor of the marginalized Filipinos, such as the youth. at the height of such corruption scandals and administrative incompetence, Chacha will only become a conduit for further exploitation of the rotting socioeconomic structures and the perpetuation of systemic inequality by vested interest. It becomes an opportunistic move against the people's call for genuine reforms and community-driven development. Revisions to certain articles of the highest law of the land will not appease growing discontent on the results of the investigation on involved officials, some of which have escaped accountability. And it will not help recover the trillion of public funds squandered away in casinos, luxury cars, and other lavish expenses incurred while the majority of Filipinos scramble for scraps of financial aid, insecure employment, and rising cost of living. We particularly take note of the proposed inclusions in the provisions under Articles 10, 14, and 16. These are the provisions stated for amendments in the resolutions of both houses, number 1, fielded by Ako Bicol Party List, and 3, fielded by District Representative Richard Gomez. Revisions of the aforementioned economic provisions perverts legislative authority and subjects the state of our national economy and patrimony to exploitation. The clause, unless otherwise provided by law, steers away from the obligation of the Constitution to protect its citizens from disadvantageous competition from foreign firms. It opens the national economy and public economic interests to exploitation. Previous charter change deliberations in the lower house plenary reveal how hasty and idealist are the propositions for foreign ownership of firms, industries, agricultural processes and products, public services, education institutions, media outfits, and advertising and public relation firms, creating special exemptions crafted as unless otherwise provided by law, opens a can of worms. This is why in what we have submitted, the position paper, we have pointed out 4 major points in the revising such bills. First is, the country does not fully benefit economically from industries and sectors open to foreign firms and investments. Second, we have poor policies and programs that will not help small-scale industries and institutions keep up with foreign competition. Third, opening the media and communication industry to foreign ownership subjects community journalism and the creative industry to commercialization and attacks on our integrity. And fourth, minimum wager Filipinos and poverty-stricken families continue to bear piling consumer taxes while the government deregulates multinational and transnational corporations, big companies through tax holidays, exemptions, and discounts. The proposals for constitutional convention, particularly House Bill 3068 by Representative Bienvenido Abante Jr. and 5870 by Representative Rolando Puno, and House Resolution number 460 do not even account for the youth's participation in the lawmaking process itself. These only provide for the formation of a delegation, but lack concrete guidelines for a more concrete and grounded composition of the representatives of the people who will kickstart it. On the other hand, the resolution of both houses, number 2, or the proposal to the lowering the age requirement for the positions of president, vice president, and senator, falls short of realizing the objective of youth participation in governance, supposedly modeled after the United States and other democracies. It fails to account for the situation of youth leadership in communities. Data from the ground will show that young members of political dynasties relatives up to the third degree of consanguinity were the majority of the members of Sangguniang Kabataan Councils and even rank and file posts in local government offices and agencies. Proposed reforms to strengthen youth representation are masked attempts to perpetuate the control of political dynasties in all branches of the government. It does not address the gaps in grassroots leadership and people-driven development. The upper echelons of the state may see changes, but it will temporary and short-handed if its local representatives still come from the same set of names that robbed opportunities for leaders born and raised by their communities. For our genuine proposals, ultimately, even if the goal of crafting precise, plain and appropriate diction for the Constitution is achieved, the current socio-political conditions will pin down its purpose and viability. The Guild, having laid down its grounds for opposition, presents to the House of Representatives its alternatives for the forwarded proposals for the Constitutional Convention. The Philippines needs genuine agrarian reform, national industrialization, protection of its natural resources to ensure sustainable development, recognition of the rights of the working masses, efficient use of capital for development, and an independent foreign policy. These programs require a strong role for the state, a strong state. What is not needed for this development is the charter change, nor the Marcos Jr. government's attempt to push it. Genuine national development in the Philippines hinges upon implementing these alternatives, even upholding the rights of the youth and the working masses, especially for social justice. Achieving these vital programs necessitates a strong and active role for the state. What the Philippines does not need for development, however, is such proposal of charter change. The 1987 Constitution's foreign investment restrictions are time-honored and in no way obsolete. This is why so many other economies in the region still have foreign equity restrictions in ordinary law. Unlike in other countries, the drafters had the boldness and confidence to hard-code these in the Constitution. What they didn't foresee, though, is the determination of economic charter change and their creativity in using ordinary laws to bypass the charter. And these foreign investment restrictions embedded in the 1987 Constitution are enduring and remain relevant. This is evidenced by the fact that many regional economies maintain similar foreign equity limitations through ordinary legislation. The framers of the Philippine Constitution uniquely demonstrated boldness and confidence by enshrining these provisions directly in the fundamental law. Their oversight, however, was perhaps not anticipating the persistent resolve of proponents of economic charter change and their inventive use of ordinary statutes to circumvent the constitutional mandates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lacerna, for stating the position of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines. Before we proceed, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Rachel Del Mar, the representative of the 1st District, City of Cebu, and also our Deputy Majority Leader and our member of the committee, the Honorable Arnan Panaligan over there. Thank you for your presence. Now we will finally hear the position of the ULAP, the Union of Local Authorities in the Philippines. Mr. Blake Barrios is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you and good afternoon. First, we thank the committee for inviting the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines to this deliberation. At the outset, sir, 2 caveats. First, all the official positions of the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines have to undergo approval by its National Executive Board. We will be having our National Executive Board meeting tomorrow, so we will bring up this matter to the National Executive Board After then, we shall submit our official position paper to the committee. Second, our comments will be focused mainly on provisions pertaining to local government units. For context, in 2024, ULAP said that if the Constitution is to be reviewed, we hope that the local government units and the leagues will be meaningfully consulted throughout the process. We believe that that request still stands, and however, whether or not there is a broad grassroots clamor for amendments is precisely why we are now canvassing the feedback of our member leagues. We will report those results to the committee. Over the years, several proposals from local officials and leagues have surfaced, including, among others, changes in national tax allotment and intergovernmental transfers or shares in national wealth and term limit adjustments. But these are proposals that we will have to look at, review, and further substantiate for now. Substantively, one major concern has emerged from our reform work on devolution, local economic development, health, disaster management, and social protection: the need to strengthen the constitutional guarantee for local autonomy. Article 10, Section 2 states that territorial and political subdivisions shall enjoy local autonomy. In recent jurisprudence, however, the practical space for local choice has narrowed. In the Mercidar Fishing Corporation ruling of the Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling that invalidated key fisheries code provisions reserving municipal waters to municipal fishers, which effectively opened municipal waters to commercial fishing, with significant implications for coastal LGUs' regulatory reach and for small-scale or artisanal fisher folks. A motion for reconsideration has been filed, but the message to LGUs is already stark. National baselines can displace local preference unless the Constitution speaks more clearly. In ULAP's position paper that it submitted to the Supreme Court, we said that the case cannot just be summarily dismissed, and we reiterated the need to uphold local autonomy, as well as the legal basis for the buffer zone, that is the 15-kilometer municipal water delineation. In another case decided recently by the Supreme Court, involving the province of Occidental Mindoro and Agusan Petroleum and Mineral Corporation, the Supreme Court struck down a province-wide ban on large-scale mining, holding that blanket prohibitions contradict the Philippine Mining Act and cannot override national policy. The court clarified that LGUs may evaluate projects case by case, but cannot impose an absolute 25-year ban. This matters to us because autonomy is not abstraction. It is the operating space that lets local government units respond to differentiated risks and align land use, health, and social protection with real conditions on the ground. When autonomy is vague, preemption fills the vacuum. Mandates and personal impositions follow without commensurate financing, and accountability blurs national intent and local capacity. However, ULAP also acknowledges that the constitutional amendment is not indispensable to achieve this. If the Constitution is to be amendment, ULAP proposes that the Congress considers clarifying and deepening the autonomy clause, especially in line with current direction towards devolution, because as we know, national government has now moved towards devolution, for example, of school building constructions, devolution of some infrastructure works. And so, if that is the direction that the national government is pursuing, then there is really a need for us to also strengthen local autonomy. In that sense, we respectfully recommend looking at the Article 10 to make autonomy genuine and meaningful, anchored on subsidiarity and cooperation. For instance, adding a clear statement rule on preemption. National laws may displace local ordinances only through an express statement of preemption and only when necessary to address a demonstrable national interest. Relative to local autonomy, of course, our LGUs will also find value in inserting a clause prohibiting the imposition upon LGUs of new functions, standards, or personal requirements without commensurate or verifiable funding sources, or what we call unfunded mandates. The national mandate must identify its financing mechanism and transition period. To be clear, these are among the options we are studying. Some goals may also be achieved without amending the Constitution through a calibrated package of organic local government code revision or amendment targeted revisions to sectoral statutes, stronger intergovernmental relation mechanisms, and budget and administrative safeguards against unfunded mandates. We will submit our ranked board-approved recommendations after the National Executive Board meeting of the ULAP tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Barrios, for stating the position of ULAP in this hearing. Now, we now would like to state that we have finished listening to our resource persons. Let me just state that for those who are not able to come, they have sent letters or called the committee that they will be submitting their position papers on December, supposed to be 8, but it's holiday, December 9. And then we will prepare the matrix for everyone, especially for the members, to make decisions on how to move forward. At this point, we call on our members, the House members, to propound their questions. So I will start with Chairman Benny Abante.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I heard from one of our resource speakers is that there is no need to revise the 1987 Constitution. But upon hearing the comments and the statements
when there is a battle between two elite, right? So the solution really, over the long run, is to have a generation of leaders who know how it is to be poor. First, barangay. Second, 3 years more, municipalities. Third, 3 years more, provincial. And then after that, we will have this new generation and we will have a real democracy in this country and not just a fiction of it.
Mr. Chair, let me continue on. No? I'm so glad that Tony Monsod is already a prophet, telling us of what the future will hold. In reality, it cannot be so. This is real talk. For example, nabanggit ninyo, nung araw, number 1 tayo. Ngayon, huli na tayo. Ito, nagbago ba ang korupsyon? Hindi. Even the US today, a very powerful country, is dealing with corruption. Just the other week, a woman representative in Congress in the US, was arrested because she stole $5 million. Is that not corruption? In China, pinagmamalaki ng China, sila ay talagang mayaman. Kaya nga binubuli tayo dito eh. Hindi ba? Death penalty has been declared to an official in China. Let me tell you this, Atty. Monsod, whether we are rich or poor, because human being is human being, corruption will always be there. You see, the love of money will always be there. Now you're telling us about poverty. Nasaan po kayo? When Cory Aquino became president, and most of the poor people invaded Manila and Parañaque and Las Piñas and took over the coastal road. Anong pong ginawa ni President Fidel Ramos? Tinanggal niya yan. Anong ginawa ng ex-president? Anong nilagay doon? Casino. Casino. Bakit casino. In this country, whether we do not become very wealthy, yet, napakaraming lupa sa bansang ito na walang tao. Every Filipino family can have a piece of land and a building if they want to, Atty. Monsod. Now, you believe in checking poverty? What did the 1987 Constitution do to the poor? Nagbago ba ang poverty sa Pilipinas? Until now, 40% of our people are below the minimum wage line. Naniniwala ba kayo na marami pang mahirap sa Pilipinas?
A lot of people do that. That's why I said in my talk na a lot of people blame the Constitution for the situation today.
Mr. Chair, I'm not blaming the Constitution. No, I'm not blaming the Constitution. I just said about the Constitution because you said that the 1987 Constitution does not need any revision. Samantalang narinig niyo ang sinabi ng mga resource speakers natin na maraming dapat na baguhin sa ating Constitution. Please take note, naniniwala din kayo dyan. You became a constitutional commissioner, that the basis of the laws of this land is the Constitution. And we are not referring to the people, we are referring to the laws of the land. This government is not ruled by the people, it is ruled by laws. Hindi po ba? Yun ang paniwala natin.
Well,
That will be the last question. So, Chairman Labante, you please have an answer. Yes. After your answer, we'll recognize one of the authors to ask questions.
Can I just,
Attorney,
mention-
Congressman Panaligan.
can I just mention something, sir?
Yes, please proceed, Chairman.
You know, I was the one who organized NAMFED against Marcos. And I was the one who organized Lente so that later lawyers can do that. I have been lawyering for farmers and urban poor for 38 years. I gave up going to business and so on. I've been, and these are my findings, sir, if you don't mind. My findings are this. The hope of this country is for us to elect from the poor, starting at the barangay, because that is complies with the principle of solidarity, which relates to nationhood, and subsidiarity, that the power should be as close to the people as possible. Those, for example, promoting feudalism, you're creating an entire level of government at the regional level, which is farthest from the people. Now, so, my only point, my experience is this. I am a believer in the bureaucracy. I think there are many good people in the bureaucracy, and sometimes they're taken away fed with corruption. This is my experience as chairman of the COMELEC. I was appointed because it was the first synchronized elections, and it would have, we were waiting for 25 years for a peaceful transfer of power. This is the elections of 1992. So I went around the provinces, and I told the people of COMELEC, you have a reputation of not knowing how to count, but I will not change any one of you. I work exactly with the same people appointed during the Marcos time. And you know, I said, all I want from you is the gift of free, fair, and regular and credible elections in 1992, so we will have a peaceful transfer of power for the first time in 27 years. And they delivered. The people of Marcos delivered. Today, when I have problems, for example, with the goons of say San Miguel, trying to build a tourism in Palawan. I could call some people I know on the PNP, so I did. And they called up. President Commander called, "Sir, what can I do?" I said, "Get rid, please, of the goons who are always oppressing the indigenous peoples when they are not even armed." And it happened. It happened. Today we have a problem in Bugsuk. Why? Because Marcos in 1974 gave Bugsuk of 10,000 hectares to Landing Cojuangco, in exchange for 1,000 in Pangasinan and Tarlac. And that's a big problem. Aquino in 2014 issued a notice of coverage for 5,000 of those properties. The present DAR reversed that decision, and we're fighting now. That's what we're against. But fortunately, there are good people and bad people in government, and the difference between good and bad, sir, is sometimes permeable, in my experience. Good people do bad things. Bad people do good things. So we have
Yeah.
together. We have to look for the people who can work.
Thank
with
you.
us.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairman. And before we proceed, let me just acknowledge the former Secretary General of the House of Representatives, Reggie Velasco, in other significant national positions, considering that I believe that our constitutional structures, our political system is not conducive for young leaders, but without privilege, without money, for example, without resources to gain political power. They may be brilliant, they may be promising, they may be people of integrity, but from our experience, they cannot win in the Senate, for example. It would be very difficult for them to win in a national election, national positions like the Senate, and of course, even in the presidency. So I believe that while there is a need, I agree that there is a need to develop young leaders, we should also see to it that our constitutional structures, our political system is conducive for the growth of these young leaders. And I believe that if there are provisions in the Constitution that should be revised, it's the political structures, no? Not so much on the economic structures. Although I agree also that economic models should not be included in the Constitution, because economic models, economic trends, they change with the time. Our Constitution, 1970 Constitution, for example, 1930 Constitution, it was the said charters were formulated in an era of nationalism. No? That's why protectionist. No? But in the 1990s, 2000s, we saw the prevalence of the globalization, liberalization. Okay? But after the pandemic, we can discern a shift back to protectionism. No? So my point is that economic models should not be enshrined in the Constitution, because it will inhibit future policymakers. So they will not be able to respond to shifting trends in economics. For me personally, I'm in favor of nationalistic provisions of the Constitution. No? I believe in national industrialization. But I believe that it should not be enshrined in the Constitution. What we should revise are the political structures. No? Our political system is dysfunctional. So, kung meron man dapat baguhin is a system of government. And the fastest mode, of course, if only the people trust Congress, is Constituent Assembly. But that is next to impossible now. No? So, CONCON, perhaps, is the best mode to amend the Constitution. Thank you, Congressman Panaligan. We go first to Dr. Rita Carlos and then to Chairman Nelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to give some overview, listening to all the comments around the table. I think there is a need for a unity in the new constitution that will be drafted by whichever body. Why? Because a constitution will have to stitch together all the sections therein and will have to be governed or underpinned by a philosophy of governance. In other words, Mr. Chair, you cannot have sections that are colliding with each other because the philosophies are, they are colliding. And therefore, there must be a unity. I like what Congressman Panaligan said. You change the political structure and the rest of the substructures will follow. This is not, to denigrate economic provisions. I always say, as a political scientist, I know that it's the political really, which is the fulcrum of all political power. So when you change the constitution, revision, you change the power configuration therein. But it must be stitched together. It must be crocheted by a philosophy of governance. Hindi pwedeng you're shooting here and there, tapos nagbubungguan siya. That's the reason why, and to the question of Congressman Puno kanina, siguro maganda rin yung i-appoint siya. No? I've never thought about it really. But the vetting procedure should be very strict. And because I'm a political scientist, I would lean more towards more political scientists in the commission. Why? Because a political scientist is trained in the tradition of science. In other words, however, emotion you might put into your aspirations, your advocacies, data is king, which means whatever empirical evidence is there, then that should be followed. Say, if the empirical evidence tells you that, you don't need term limits, you don't need political dynasties, they are not the predictor variables. The predictor variables are somewhere else. So let's put science in all this, and I agree, Mr. Chair. The emotion is there, all right. But I think the science should also be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos. So we now go to the last comment of the chairperson, and then we'll ask the members if they have more questions, and then we can probably call this a day. Yes, Chairman Monsod.
Sir, I just wanted to say that when we're talking about the Constitution, as if, that's the solution. I think the solution is let us implement the Constitution. Now, when you, for example, talk about unless otherwise provided by law, it's a very dangerous proposal because it's a wholesale transfer of power from the Constitution to the Congress, for example, on foreign ownership. Once inserted, the constitutional provisions become meaningless, and the door is opened wider to transactional legislation to which corrupt politicians and greedy business are very adept. The insertion is insidious because it is made to appear as a harmless, since it only gives Congress flexibility to determine the actual percentages at the appropriate time. But the change is made only by ordinary law, with much lesser House and Senate votes and without need of a vote of the people in the plebiscite. Incidentally, in terms of numbers, when we talk about changes now in the Constitution, you need what? You need how many votes? About over 237 votes, 240 votes from the Senate, and how many? 70 or 18 from the Senate. With this insertion, you will need only about 80 congressmen and 7 senators, and that's what the people are suspicious about. Now, let me just close, sir, if I may. My first point is this. Are we agreed on the ends? Because if we don't agree on the ends, then our means will not be the same. And if we agree on the ends, which is to have a new social order, in other words, a democracy that works, which, by the way, is not a partisan political purpose, are we willing to pay the price for it? Especially if it is against our own self-interest. Are we willing to make sacrifices for love of country and for the poor? Because we are told sacrifice is the currency of love. My second point, when the social contract between the government and the people may be breaking down, like today, the community should take it among themselves to change the nature of the social contract. The pandemic, as I said before, had one big contribution to show us about the community.
Chairman, can you just wind up because we already heard about your transactional comments and so forth. So,
I
yes,
just want to give the example of Sinergia, where in 500 municipalities, where barangay captains are helping parents educate the children. My third point is already said that I think the poor should exercise their power. My fourth point, democracy is about dialogue and compromise, and I already mentioned that there are good.
already mentioned that.
And our country is in need of heroes today. Not the super heroism of Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Ninoy Aquino, but as ordinary everyday heroes, described by author Philip Zimbardo as, quote, the courage to expose fraud when we see it or to say no to complicity in wrongdoing, or by the hardness to be different or difficult to do what is right when it's easier to conform.
Thank you, Chairman. So we take note of what you have stated. The others, we can submit that and will be put in our matrix. So with that, well,
Mr. Chair.
a final,
Mr. Chair, yes, I have one question.
first from the Congressman, and then we'll have Dr. Carlos.
I just would like to ask a question to Attorney Monsod, what he said a moment ago. Ang sabi niya kanina na hindi kinakailangan ng revision, pero hindi kailangan ng bagong konstitusyon. Yun ang sabi niya. So I was wondering, sino mag-revise sa old constitution kung hindi ang Constitutional Convention? Sapagkat sabi niya, hindi kailangan ang Constitutional Convention. So ang tanong ko, sino mag-revise? Kung hindi kailangan ng new constitution, who will revise the old constitution? Sapagkat inamin niya eh. He admitted that the 1987 Constitution needs some revisions. With that, pagkatapos yung sagot nito, I also would like to ask Justice Carpio what he thinks of the statement said a moment ago by Attorney Monsod. Oo. Siya muna.
Take that question to our former associate, senior associate justice.
My
What is
question
the question
first.
to Justice Carpio?
My question first to Attorney Monsod. If you do not believe that there should be a constitutional convention and that there is no need for a new constitution, but you believe the 1987 constitution must be revised, who will revise? Yun ang unang yung tanong ko kay Attorney Monsod. And I would like also to ask that same question to Justice Carpio if he agrees with that.
But the question is, earlier, did you admit that there is a need to revise the Constitution? No or not? Is there a need to revise the Constitution or not?
There are changes that can be done. I like the proposal of Secretary of Congressman Puno. That there are things that can be done, but maybe not now, because now is not a bad place for that. And
So there is a need, but not now. Thank you. So that is the position of Chairman Monsod. We'll ask also now the same question there's still a need to revise the Constitution. That is a question of our Congressman, Chairman Abante, to Justice Carpio.
Yes, Mr. Chair, my position is we should shift to a parliamentary system that requires revision. Thank you.
Thank you. So do you have, hey, last question from Congressman Panaligan.
Final point, Mr. Chair. I reiterate my stand that there is a need to review whether to amend or revise or adopt a new charter. There is a need to review the present constitution. It has been 37 years, and I believe that our experience in the past 37 years should have taught us already about the flaws, the defects, or the shortcomings or the inadequacies of the Constitution. We are not blaming the charter for the present problem, no? Hindi po tayo misunderstand dyan. But a charter is also a blueprint, no? Nakaka-apekto po yan eh. Whether sa politika, sa economics, in our social life, may epekto yung ating basic charter. So, we should review that. Disclosure, in 1992 or 91, I wrote an article in a law journal, no? Why we should not amend the 87 Constitution. But that was 1992, 5 years. At the time, the current charter was only 5 years old. So my point at that time was that let's give it a chance to work. No? But after 37 years, I think that now is the time to revise the present charter. Hindi po naman yan sagradong dokumento, hindi po yan gospel na hindi pwedeng baguhin ng mga tao. So now is the time, no, to amend the present charter. Sabi nga ni Roscoe Pound, the law must be stable but it cannot stand still. Kaya paano na po dapat ipag-usapan without emotionalism and sentimentalism.
Thank you very much, Congressman Panaligan. For the last point, Dr. Carlos, and then we will thank everyone.
Just a very brief point. Counterintuitively, the term unless otherwise provided by law is really a channel for change. Why are we putting so much negative connotation to that phrase? When in fact, when you have a constitution, you are not able to foresee what the future looks like. Suppose you have an article there on generative AI. We don't know what the future looks like. So when you put a clause there, like unless provided by law, it's really a channel for recalibration, which you give to the legislature, whether it's unicameral or bicameral. So I don't think we should, treat that phrase so negatively, because it's really a channel for recalibration of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we would therefore would like to thank. I'll give Chairman Monsod one last point.
I just want to say,
It's a contrary position of Dr. Carlos. One last point.
I just want to say something. I think you can earn the trust of the people if you pass an anti-dynasty law and amend the party list system. If you do that, then you can do many things in changes in the Constitution.
Well noted. So on that note, we would like to thank all our resource persons. It has been very enlightening. We have the experts here and we have everyone. So thank you so much for your presence, and please submit your position papers so that it will be placed in the matrix. Thank you, my distinguished colleagues. Thank you, our valued resource persons. Thank you very much. Can you have a group picture? Yeah, for this batch. Thank you. You will go to the front for our picture taking. All right. The meeting is now adjourned after the picture taking.